Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Haley Spierbauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. We have an incredible guest today who knows the education space incredibly well. We have Michael Lombardo, the founder and CEO of Brightbee, joining us here today. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Haley. Thanks for having me.
I am thrilled to talk to you. It was very hard as I was preparing for this conversation to really narrow down what questions I wanted to ask you because you and I have lived in in a parallel space for so many years in ed tech. So get ready because this is the final cut coming up.
I love it. Let's go.
Michael, start us off by telling everybody, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
I love that question. My dad didn't go to college. He was a natural gas technician in rural northern Michigan, and because this was the late 1970s, he was able somehow to talk himself into a job on the PR team, and became an executive and was able to provide my family with an awesome middle class lifestyle. But like that doesn't exist anymore. And he was insistent that I go to college. I went to the University of Michigan, go blue, where my daughter is a junior also. We are a multi-generational Michigan family. I'm trying to help you get the Michigan fandom behind you, Haley.
Yeah, now the whole fan base is listening. They're all liking and
It's
subscribing. Yep.
That's exactly right. Go blue. And yeah, I mean, it was an experience that changed my life. And growing up in northern Michigan, going and being in the Detroit area, being exposed to the diversity that is U of M and one of its greatest strengths. I mean, it was everything to me. And I went to college with one idea of who I was going to be. I was going to be a lawyer. That was my life plan, and left with a completely different idea. And I thought I was going to be a professor. And went off to move to California. Took a job working at UC Berkeley, which is where I wanted to go to grad school. And the wonder of higher education, my life plan changed again. And I got promoted a couple times as administrator. I, sort of became really excited about being a leader in the space of education and equity. And so the professor thing went out the window. And I think education is such a special thing in the way that it helps us just to reinvent ourselves and to build the skills that we need to. And so I've been passionate about providing equitable access to an excellent education like what I received to everybody, regardless of their background or what zip code they were born in. And that's been my whole career. And so, yeah, but I'll start with my dad working for Michigan.
I appreciate a pivot, and it sounds like you've had a couple of those. Education and the why behind folks getting into education, maybe not as teachers, but as entrepreneurs or as social impact entrepreneurs, which I know you define yourself as that. I think it really does speak to everybody has a story about education being powerful in their trajectory. So you've taken some really straight paths since your entry into ed tech. Talk to me a little bit about the challenges you've looked to solve and how you think these particular challenges are part of the greater. I'm going to say that again. Talk to me about how you think these particular challenges you've chosen are part of the greater ecosystem and why those are the ones that deserve the attention you've given.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lazy fella, and I focused on things like higher education because if you look at a lot of issues that I'm passionate about politically, whether it's about climate or it's about social justice, the through line is people who have a college degree tend to, sort of support and move those needles. And so getting everybody a college degree doesn't just, increase prosperity and economic opportunity, but it helps us make progress on a range of issues. And so that was my story in higher ed, and similarly, I spent close to 15 years working in early literacy, and literacy is a similar lazy man's play. So if you want the single biggest ROI on getting a kid to go to college, it is third grade reading scores. You increase their probability of attending college by 400% if they are reading proficiently by the end of third grade. There is no other higher ROI in K-12, and so again, I was lazy. I was like, how do we get more kids into college quick and easy? Oh, we just got to make sure they master reading at an early age. And so that drew me into that space, and I think what also made it interesting to me, and what I would say is another through line in the work that I've done in education and technology, is we know the answer to reading. Like, it is science that we've known for 20 years. And the problem is, how do you get massive bureaucracies that are school districts to change their practices and put into place the things that we know work? And it's, it's an enormous challenge. And you have, wonderful, well-intentioned people who are caring, and are there for the right reasons, trying to support students, but creating change within this hyper-regulated, complex bureaucracy that is education is incredibly hard. And I love that challenge.
I This is just comical to me to hear you call yourself lazy because I know the work you're doing and I know you cannot be lazy to do this work. Talk to me a little bit about that bureaucracy and what surprised you most about coming to work with K-12 school districts from higher ed.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of commonalities. They are oftentimes, from a technology standpoint, operating on legacy systems that are far out of date. They are, constrained by their own policies and procedures. They have complex labor agreements. Like, there's a lot of similarities. And I think what I learned the most about K-12 was that there was what I would describe as a stronger outcomes-based alignment than there was in higher education. And that's not to say that higher education doesn't care about outcomes, but I think if you ask faculty kind of why they're there and what the purpose of their work is, they don't talk about sort of creating economic opportunity for students in measurable ways. And I think, for better or for worse, one of the things that has been a hallmark of the last 20 years in education reform is really trying to be more evidence-based and trying to be more data-based. And I think higher education, ironically, generates a lot of the research that we use in K-12 to try to think about impact, but is maybe doesn't turn that microscope on itself quite as often. And there's a whole separate conversation we can have about the future of higher education. Another, now that I have a daughter in college, who is making what is one of the biggest economic investments anyone makes in their life, which is to pay for a college degree. I think the way that's changing and evolving is really interesting as well. And so yeah, so I would say it's the focus on trying to measure and trying to be evidence based is stronger in K-12, and that's an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a topic I love listening to people speak about and learning about how different organizations are doing that. How are they measuring impact? How are schools really accelerating and putting gasoline on the fire of solutions and implementations and interventions that work for kids? Uh, it's also a topic, though, that is getting more attention today now that funding streams have lessened or dried up. And schools are having to make difficult decisions with under enrollment issues about where they spend their money. So, given that you spend a lot of time talking to schools today and that you've chosen a slightly different problem to solve with Brightbee than you focused on in the past with early childhood literacy, what conversations are you having about funding and where we allocate funding with districts today?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to founders a lot and advise early stage companies in the ed tech space, and I would say it's pretty big headwinds in instructional kind of SaaS based models. This might sound flip, but the analogy I've been using is the Hunger Games. It's like, the schools went and brought a lot of people into the dome during ESSER, and now only one is going to come out. And so it's tough. And I think it's really important that you have a strong value proposition that gets to a top five problem for a superintendent. B, that you can quantify, that you're moving the needle for them, and C, ideally, you can show them that either it's an extremely cost-effective invention or intervention that you've deployed, or that you're helping them save money in some way. Because these structural issues you referenced around declining enrollment, ESAs, like, the world of K-12 funding, independent of what's happening at the federal level, even at the state level, is changing pretty dramatically right under our feet. And it is creating new financial pressures for districts that just make it hard for them to say, hey, I saw this cool new math app that my third graders might benefit from, and I'm going to throw $10,000 at it. Like, that was the mindset for a long time, and now
Sure.
it's not.
Yeah. So, what are those top five issues? Let's see where we agree.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, so yeah, is this like a reveal situation? We'll go one by one. Like, So enrollment is huge,
Mhm.
and I would say it's regional a little bit. There are parts of the United States where enrollment's growing; it's less of a concern. But if you are in an urban district, urban or first ring suburb, or if you are on the coasts, enrollment. I would say, again, budget, anything related to finance and enrollment is related to budget, but I think some of the tools that are getting great traction are tools that are able to help districts save money. And school finance is so complex. Like we should give college degrees in that subject. Like it is unbelievable what they have to manage through with all the different funding sources they have, the way they have to be allocated, and usually there's waste. It's impossible to have systems as large as this, as complex as this, and not having waste. And so tools that help schools identify waste and reduce expenses have a lot of tailwinds. Staffing, I'm biased, obviously, because I'm leading a company that now is focused on that issue, but it is a huge pain point. It is both a liability concern because they are out of compliance oftentimes on ratios or on their IEPs. And also, it has a massive impact on both the student and the teacher experience. And if you talk to a teacher and ask them what it's like when their para's gone for the day, like they will tell you that's a really hard day for them. And a lot of them, that's the day when they think about quitting teaching.
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure that the workforce is strong, stable, engaged, and not turning over is a huge concern for every school leader I talk to. And then I think there is a lot of focus and energy still around how we accelerate learning after the pandemic. And the data nationally, unfortunately, show that we have not recovered and will not recover. And not will not recover, but if we stay in the trajectory we're on, like
Right.
the rate of increase is not going to get us back to where we were
Sufficient
for
to
like
catch
10
kids up.
years.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think there is energy there. And then last, I would say, for better or for worse, security and kind of cell phone usage. There's a lot of energy and spend around those issues,
Mhm.
in part because states are passing laws around cell phone usage in schools, in part because there have been some very public and very unfortunate data breach scenarios that have impacted districts. And so things that are kind of trying to lock down the tech is kind of broadly how I would describe it. I think there's a lot of tailwinds there. But what are your
Yeah.
top five, Haley?
No, everything I agree with. The top 3 that I often hear are staffing issues related to teachers or bus drivers. That's like very, very common. Safety and security of their kiddos, relatedly cell phones, which you looped in there. And then thirdly is just the mental health crisis, like students, teachers, people in general being unwell and how greatly that is impacting the learning environment and the community in which kids are attending school.
Yeah, I hear that one as well. And I think there are some pretty troubling data too about behavior challenges and things that are
Mhm.
still, again, in my view, are sort of aftermath of the pandemic issue where
Sure.
uh,
Manifestation of trauma and collective trauma we experienced as adults and then secondarily to kiddos during that time is really significant.
absolutely. Now, I had a 4-year-old when we went into lockdown, and watching him try to do like online preschool was pretty painful.
Yeah.
And when you talk to teachers about like what's happening in the pre-K, TK, and K space, it's actually less about learning their alphabet and their early numeracy, and a lot of it is just about socialization and learning how
Yeah.
to be a part of a group that is doing shared learning activities. And we have a generation of kids who like missed a year and a half of that at a really critical developmental window. And so it should not surprise us at all that they have ongoing challenges there. So I completely agree. The mental health crisis is very real. Is something that I hear district leaders worrying about a lot.
Okay, so let's go back to staffing. Obviously, you founded Brightbee on the idea that the staffing challenge is impacting more than just having a vacancy in a position, but it's interfering with the whole ecosystem. Talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you see the work you're doing today changing the trajectory of the schools you're serving.
Yeah, I mean, it really you have to understand that schools operate on a foundation of day-to-day operations, and they are, for better or for worse, as much childcare as they are education. And so attending to the needs of the student, making sure they are fed and safe and in a place where learning can happen is the bedrock on which everything else sits. And it was eye-opening to me during the pandemic when I was leading Book Nook, seeing how often these really important and often highly funded kind of learning acceleration programs were sort of dropped or put on hold because the base of that kind of pyramid wasn't there. And if the person whose job it was to pull a student out of class and walk them down the hall so they could get their book nook tutoring, if that person was not at work today, then the tutoring didn't happen. And so I think it really opened my eyes that like these, workers who do classified and support positions, they are the unsung heroes of the building. They make sure that everything happens that we care about most, and that is, like I said, the health and safety of children and wellness of children, as well as the academic instruction. And going back to the teacher who has a para out for the day, if you're dealing with a student who is what in California we call a mod severe student without a para, like no one's learning very much that day because you're so distracted dealing with that student's needs that you can't do your job as a teacher. And so our theory of action on the school impact side at Brightbee is very much about school climate, and the incredible role that classified and support workers play in creating a climate that is both safe and supportive for students and also conducive to learning. I like to point out to superintendents all the time that the first person a student interacts with every day is usually a classified worker. It's their bus driver, or it's the person who's doing yard duty when they show up, getting dropped off by a parent or guardian. And the last person they interact with at the end of the day is also usually a classified worker. It's the
Yeah.
after school staff. And so these folks played just such a critical role. And for a variety of reasons, they tend to be less seen than the teaching staff. And I think what got me excited about Brightbee was seeing there was a lot of energy, both within the world of startups and within the world of policymakers about the teacher shortage, but a lot less energy being paid to the classified worker shortage.
Mhm.
And for me, that was, as a then two-time founder, now three-time founder, like when you see a really big problem that plays a huge role in students' lives and no one else is working on it, you get pretty excited.
I don't know what I would do without Alice. Now, you probably don't know who Alice is, but Alice is my kid's bus driver. And my youngest son has a 504 because he has food allergies. So 2 years ago, when he started kindergarten, we wanted to have an aide on the bus with him to hold his EpiPen because he's too young to carry. Self carry is the term. And the school said they couldn't find any aides. And the bus driver was willing to be trained in how to administer an EpiPen so that he could ride the bus with his brother and not have to be in a separate bus, not with his brother, not with his cousin, not with our neighbors. So we love Alice. And just yesterday, Alice, when my son, same one, now he's 6, wouldn't wear his coat on the bus to school. Alice carried it for me and then made him put it on and told me in the afternoon that she wouldn't let him get on the bus until the coat was on his body. So, yeah, these like our aides in buildings have such a pivotal and critical role in kids being successful every day. And to your point, and when we talk about mental health crises, often are the first people who know when something's wrong with a kid. They're the ones
100%.
who know if a kid didn't eat breakfast that day, or they got in a fight with their parent, or there was, they didn't sleep at their house the night before, because they're the first folks interacting with kids before their teachers see them. So they can be like the first line of defense if something's really wrong with a child.
100%. And a lot of times they're the institutional memory of the school itself too. And
Mm,
there's that custodian who's been in the building for 15 years, and the
sure.
principal has come and gone, and the teachers have come and gone, and the students have come and gone. But that person has been a constant, and contributing to that school community, and it's such an important role they play. And it's unfortunate, and part of why we at Brightbee really like to lead with impact, is that I don't think that's a part of the narrative we have around classified and support staff. Like if you want to be depressed, like go to your local school district and read the job description they have online for a custodian. And it's like, take the trash out because the trash needs to get taken out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't talk about what you're describing with Miss Alice, where it's like, no, you're going to play a role in every student's day, and they're going to know your name, and you're going to know theirs, and you're going to help them when they're not feeling well. You're going to help them when they, are feeling well and want to, play with you out in the yard. Like there's just such a wonderful experience of being in a school and being around young people, and I don't think the K-12 system does a great job communicating that and really talking about these as jobs that, are so emotionally fulfilling. And that's critical because the K-12 space will never be able to compete with the private sector in terms of compensation. And so we have to be like, all right, if we can't pay as much as going and working at a warehouse at Costco, then what is the story we're telling to somebody who is thinking about a custodian job in our district, and how do we tell them that you may trade off a little bit of income, but you're going to be richer, your soul will be richer because of the work that you're doing, and use that as our competitive edge, right?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the way you phrase that is really beautiful. And so many times you hear people say that about the education profession in general. Like you don't become a teacher because you want to be a billionaire. You become a teacher because you want to change lives and you want to help shape the next generation. You know, Michael, AI is everywhere in ed tech right now. And Full Mind and Brightbee are betting still on this in person or virtual teacher who is providing the human guided support that schools require. So, what do you think as the AI cycle? I won't call it hype because I think we're past a little bit of the hype and now we're just living in it. What do you think is overblown and what do you think is genuinely transformative? And how are you taking that back to what you're doing at Brightbee?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you that nothing AI does replaces the loving relationship that a student has with the caring adults in their lives, whether those are family members or people at the school. And Going back to the mental health crisis, if anything, we need more of that. And I think one of the things that concerns me about AI is sort of the synthetic relationships that students can form with it, older students that interact with it. And I think we need more human connection and interaction that is caring and supportive, not less. And so yeah, I'm with you, all in on sort of real humans interacting with real students. I think AI can be a powerful tool to help make those interactions more meaningful, or more, and I mean that in a kind of academic sense, like helping me to differentiate instruction for you, helping me to understand what's happening with you. I think it's a helpful tool. At the same time, I think what I hear from districts is, they're kind of AI curious, and they, are seeing the hype, as you say, and feeling like, okay, I don't want to miss the boat. I want to make sure I'm sort of doing my diligence and checking out what these tools are. But on the whole, AI spending is, I would bet less than a fraction of a percent of most schools' budget, and people are like 80% of that budget. And so I think the energy around taking care of the people and making sure the people part of the equation is really strong is a bigger priority than AI. And I think the edtech AI space right now is, there's been a lot of funding and a lot of companies, and there's a lot of duplication, where there are three or four different companies that all do kind of the same thing. And so I think that naturally, again, it'll be another Hunger Games scenario. I think some of there's going to have to be, one company that comes out of each of these spaces that manages to kind of break out and create significant traction and market share. I expect funding will start to kind of consolidate around those companies. But there's just a lot of noise out there, and a lot of companies that are doing something similar to other companies, but haven't yet differentiated. And I think, I tell founders this all the time too. Like what kills most ed tech is the go to market. It's not like the company that has the best product that usually wins. It's the company that executes go to market successfully. And so what I'm interested in, what I'm always watching for, isn't like show me your cool feature set because your feature set looks a lot like other people's feature set. It's what's your traction, and kind of what's your strategy on go to market and how successful are you with it. And I think the companies that nail that part down are the ones that will be the survivors. And may the odds ever be in their favor.
You just actually answered my next question, which was like, what's one piece of advice given to founders that you completely disagree with? You kind of answered that. So I'm curious when you're thinking as a three-time founder about speaking to the audience in the right way. Is there more to it than sharing your story concisely and thoughtfully, that really speaks to a particular pain point that you've driven both of the 2 organizations I know well with? Is there like, talk to me a little bit about that because you mentioned go to market, so I wanna dig into that a bit because that's something that I think is the reason I found you, is because Brightbee was, like, all over my feed, and I was understanding what challenge you were solving very deeply. So, yeah, just share about that.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like understand the problem that you are solving and make sure that that problem is a pain point for a decision maker that controls budget. And I like to joke that ed tech at its worst is kind of a solution in search of a problem. And I think the companies that nail their go-to-market just understand their customer and understand
Yeah.
what their customer is worrying about and how they can help it. And then the other piece, and I say this to our team at Brightbee, I said to our team at Booknook, like the most important skill that you have when you're doing go-to-market work is being a good listener. It's a huge pet peeve of mine when, a salesperson or a founder spends their time, 75% doing the talking and telling me all about all their features and all the things. It's like the Maya Angelou quote, so people forget what you say, but they remember how you made them feel. And so it's about how do you help them feel heard and listened to, and that you are there to help them solve their problems and you care about their problems. And they're going to forget about your cool feature set and your whatever integration with Claude and all. It's like they're going to forget all that stuff. What they're going to
Yeah.
remember is like this was a human who showed up, who expressed concern about me, asked me questions, learned about me, and seemed to like express a genuine interest in collaborating with me to solve my problems. And that's the person I'll take a second meeting with. So yeah, so it's the human part, and don't get so obsessed with your product that you spend all your time talking about how great it is. Spend your time like unearthing the problems of the human you're talking to, and that will get you further.
I think you just named the episode. It's the
Unearthing the
human part.
problems of the humans.
No, it's the human part. It's the human part.
I like
Right?
that.
Because that's not like a lot of what you and I believe deeply in this work, and what we're trying to support in school districts as they face significant challenges. Both of us identified them as top 5 challenges. So as a final question, Michael, I'm curious, what advice would you give a teacher or a school leader starting their career today? Actually, let's do school leader because I feel like that's a lot of who we've talked about here today.
Yeah, I mean, I think for school leaders, it is all about how you understand, ask for, and accept help. You are doing an impossible job. You are the small point in the hourglass. You have dozens of people in your building who depend on you. You have dozens of administrators above you that are pushing initiatives and doing things, and it's just such a difficult job. And the principals who I have seen be the most successful are the ones that are able to show vulnerability, to say, I am in over my head, or I just feel like I have more on my desk that I can possibly get to, and I'm going to figure out how I can delegate, outsource, like bring in a partner to help me instead of doing what well-meaning people do all the time, which is no, I'll just buckle down and push really hard and I'll get through it. And that strategy very rarely works out. So it's okay to ask for help. You're doing an impossible job, and there are people around you who are standing by to be a resource to help you.
I love that. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the Learning Can't Wait podcast and sharing your ethos and your why and how you have really tackled many different problems with a similar through line of caring for how our system and education ecosystem overall operates.
Well, thank you. You're very kind to say that. It was a delight being here, and I love that, you're out there with your finger on the pulse in the way that I am, and it's always good to compare notes with somebody who understands the field as well as you, Haley. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everybody for tuning in, and really to the Learning Gateway guests because they're the ones who help me keep my finger on the pulse.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.